More parts.
All right, more parts. Big end of the number 2 connecting rod was out around. It's not very visible. At least I didn't think it was very visible at first. But when you measure it, you can definitely see that it's out around and it's not going to work. So new connecting rod, and obviously I already discovered the piston rings were no good. That's what scratched up the cylinder. So new ring, new connecting rod for the number 2 piston. No big deal. We got to get those put on, and that's what we're going to do now. But the plan here, we'll get that rod on, get the new rings on, and then we can actually start connecting the crankshaft with the block, with the pistons, and we'll start to have a bottom end for this motor. Before we do that, a word about the connecting rods. These are really cool. I honestly don't think I've ever held a brand new connecting rod in my hand and really looked at it and seen it, but it is a gorgeous piece of fabrication. They're referred to as like a fractured rod, right? And what that means is they make it as one piece, and then they break it so that on the big end so that it can go around the crankshaft journal. What's really cool is that on the new connecting rod, with it bolted up, and it came bolted up, you can't tell that it's two pieces. It is so finely machined. As I go back now and I look at the other connecting rods, you can definitely see why the number 2 is got some problems. So here we are. This is the brand new one right here. So somewhere in here is the fracture point. Honestly, I can't find it. It's in this area somewhere. It's really, really, really hard to see. But you can bring it up and you can look at that, and you just can't tell where it is. Somewhere, or right in this area, is where the 2 pieces meet, but you just can't even tell. It is so finely machined, and that's pretty cool. You can kind of look at these, and you can see on 5 of these, as you look at it, you can kind of see where it splits. So right there, you can see that. This one, right up in there, you can kind of see it, and there. Kind of hard to see. You sort of have to be looking for it. Over here, my number 2, it is painfully obvious. It is a big mark right there, and you can definitely tell that that's where this thing is fractured, and that's a byproduct of it being out around. So definitely glad that I'm replacing that. Honestly, after looking at this thing and how beautiful it is, I'm kind of sad I didn't buy 6 new connecting rings, although at $300 a piece, that makes it a little cost prohibitive. But there you are, finely machined piece of steel that we've got to get into the engine. So it's the wrist pin surface up here. What we've got to do is get the piston off of this connecting rod so that we can put it on to the new connecting rod. So that's our next step. All right, so we've got to get the piston off of the connecting rod, and it's held onto the wrist pin through a circlip, and that's right down in here. So what we have to do is we just have to get that circlip popped out. So we'll put our tool in and simply lever it out, kind of starting at one end, and we'll just lever it around and boom. After a short walk to go pick it up from across the room, Viola, we now have a circlip. It's right out of there. So set that to the side, and now we have to take and push that wrist pin out. The manual says to press it out, but don't think that means you need a press. So you simply go to the other side, the side you didn't remove the circlip from, and you can stick your thumbs right in there, and it doesn't take a whole lot of persuasion. It will just start to pop right on out. It's pretty simple. Just give it a little push. Comes out the other side. You can see right there. Grab a hold of it. Just kind of turn it back and forth, and it will slide right out. No big deal. Comes out very easily. Piston pops right off the connecting rod, and there you go. So that can come out. We can get it all cleaned up and get it ready to reassemble onto the new rod. It's hard to see in the video, but right in there, it's definitely worn down, the connecting rod. You can kind of see just a bare mark of that, and that's where the piston was hitting the wrist. That's where the piston was hitting the connecting rod. So really, it's a good thing we're replacing this thing. You know, this thing's bad. It's out of round. It's got to go. But like Seth says, it's a very finely machined piece of excrement. So next thing we got to do is get it all cleaned up, get it looking pretty, getting ready to go back in. So we'll just sort of skip over that. Little brake cleaner, a little bit of rubbing, and here we are. One of the things I wanted to do here is I wanted to check and compare the number 2 wrist pin and all that to another one of the cylinders that wasn't having this problem. Because I'm going to reuse this piston. This was set to go regardless. Everything was fine with it. No big deal. So I just wanted to take a look. And it's kind of hard to see, but roughly speaking, if I look inside of here at this surface, I'm roughly speaking seeing basically the same type of wear and condition of the bushing up there. So I feel pretty good that that's going to be fine. Let's keep these straight. We want to make sure they stay in the right place. But we're going to go ahead and reuse the piston. It should be fine. We're just going to put it on the new connecting rod. So I got to get these guys put back together now. All right, so something important to know about these pistons is that they are definitely there's different pistons for each side, and they do need to be put on the right way. So right here, this is 3, this is 1, and that's 2 over there. So this is number 6, and that's number 4 or 5's over there. I ran out of table space. So you'll notice with these guys, so these are 2 that have not been apart, and if I orient these the same direction, all right, we have different markings here. So these markings over here will be the same. So if we flip this over, 8370B, 8370B. So the other side, however, 10 versus a 3. And then there's another part number that's in there. It's a little harder to see right there. But you'll notice that when they're on here, they're kind of backwards from each other. Notice the orientation of the big end of the rod. So I need to ensure that when I put these back together, I'm putting them back together the correct way. So if I put my rod out there, this is a number 3, so 1, 2, and 3 are one direction, 4, 5, and 6 are the other. They're different pistons as well. So here's my 3. So right here, I'll rotate this around so it just looks just like that. Then this comes down on here, like so. And the pin will drop through. We're going to lubricate that pin up, make sure it's good and lubed going in. We'll use a little assembly lube to get that in. All right, so a little assembly lube. Make this guy very clean. Definitely don't want any grit going in. Plenty of lubrication up in there. And we'll go right on in like so. And now the fun part. There.
Okay, that went pretty fast. Why don't we see that again, but this time in slow motion?
All right, so anyway, putting the circlip in.
Did I say slow motion? My bad. Getting this thing was a pain in the rear end. You always see on YouTube all these videos about people just taping and just boom, 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 and they're done. Well, this is what it really looks like behind the scenes. I screwed around with this thing forever.
Alright, one of the things I recommend for installing these circlips is take this oil control ring especially, but really all of them, and rotate them around. We'll set them later. Rotate them around like that. This way, when you miss, that's smooth and not something that's going to gash your finger. Ask me how I know. Ow.
So this is what it really looks like trying to get this thing on. It really took quite a while. And it was really frustrating. So one of the things really that you just have to do is it just is a matter of levering it in with the screwdriver very carefully so as not to injure yourself as I did. But it might take you a while to get the first one and maybe the second one too.
Now everybody else on YouTube will sit here and show you, oh yeah, it's real easy to install a retaining ring and a piston for the rest pin. It's super easy to install one of those. All you got to do is snap it in. I just use my thumbs. They're liars. One thing to keep in mind is that little bit right there, that's your escape route for it later. That's how you get it out. So if you line it up like this, you're never going to get the thing out. So line it up a different way. The other thing is that this gets shallower as you go along. So I like to start over here, so that as I bring this and shrink it down and get it onto that first step, there's plenty for it to bite on. Kind of hold it into place there, and then come around. There it is. There. Just started to go in. There it goes. And then, boom. There it is. Totally doable. Not a bad job. Just takes a little trial and error and a little patience. That's all. Next step, of course, we got to get the ring out.
And if you're very careful, you can go ahead and pull those rings out. You just kind of pry them out, use ring expander, whatever. Just be really careful that you're not damaging the grooves on the piston, the sides of the piston, the top of the piston, anything on the piston really. You just don't want to damage anything, but it can be done if you're very careful. Once all the rings are out, we need to make sure everything's cleaned up. If there's any gunk in there, it'll keep the rings from being able to move freely later on, so we don't want that. So kind of wipe it down, a little brake cleaner, and actually one of the best things to clean those grooves is a broken piston ring. So go to town. Simply take your time, work your magic through there, and you'll have that thing cleaned off in no time. You can also soak it in some berrymans. This process seems to work pretty well too. So we have a nice new set of rings from Mail, I don't know. Anyway. Crack that puppy open. You'll have, those are the oil control rings that just came out. All sorts of good stuff on this pamphlet, I'm sure, but really it's relatively basic. If you just take a look at what you have on there, it's going to tell you which rings go where the markings are to tell where it's top, where it's bottom. You'll also notice that package is cleverly designed to make sure you know which ring is which. We start out with the like the spring part of the oil control ring, and that's going to go on first. That's a complete ring, basically. It's not like the others where there's a gap. So it's just going to slide right on. It'll go right down into that bottom groove on the piston. Slides right in. Takes a little fiddling, and do be careful because it's a little bit delicate. This is what's basically going to be pushing on that oil control ring to keep the oil in the crankcase and out of the combustion. It's a non-directional. There's no top and bottom to that ring, so that just will slide on. And then there's a groove on the inside of that ring, and that's where that little spring is going to ride. So it's going to sit in there to push that out and keep it where it needs to be. So it'll just go right down over the piston and go right into place. Probably the easiest one to install. All right, so you've got that ring on there. Make sure that that spring is in that groove all the way around. Just be real careful with that. You don't want to have to go back in after this later, obviously. But you just make sure it doesn't get pinched anywhere. And then once you've done that and it's all in that groove all the way around, you'll notice it'll move very freely on there. And that's a successful oil control ring installation right there.
Time to assemble. It's all wiped down. Squirters are all in place. Next step is to install the thrust bearings. So I'm working with the workshop system over here. So last was to remove the thrust plates from the crankcase. And when you install in reverse order, that means the first thing is for the thrust plates to go in the crankcase.
And we have a problem. So I got it all put together, and as you can see here, I was going to show all that, but I had to take it all back apart because that crankshaft should turn very, very easily right there. Very little resistance, and it doesn't turn at all. It's locked in place. Turns out, machine shop did the main journals to 0.3 millimeters instead of 0.5. And obviously my 0.5 mil oversized bearings are just, they're frozen on it. They're not going to work. Machine shop's got the crank again. They're going to do it right this time, theoretically. And once they do, I'll be back. In the meantime, do I need new bolts? That's a $125 bolt set, so we'll have to have that conversation. Interestingly enough, the spec in WIS says that those bolts should be no more than 67.8 millimeters in length. But they're like 6-inch bolts when they're brand new, and 67.8 millimeters is something like 3 inches, a little less than 3 inches. So I'm not sure, what's going on with that. But we'll figure that out, and yeah, we'll just have to get back to you next time and see how it goes. So this kind of concludes part 3. I'm sorry it's so disappointing. Looks like part 4 is going to start pretty much right where this one started almost. But the plan is once I get that crankshaft back, it should go in, it should be good, and it should turn freely, and we'll be able to continue on with the engine assembly. But for now, disappointing, but here's where we're at, and we'll see you next time.